The morning started like most others, the kind where you expect the usual clatter of the paperboy and the hum of distant traffic. I pulled on a clean work shirt, already feeling the ache in my shoulders from yesterday's landscaping. Looking out my kitchen window, I noticed Ethan's garage door stood wide open. That was not like Ethan. He was particular about security, especially after his last camera equipment went missing. Then I saw his trash cans, overturned near the curb, their contents spilled across the damp grass. Empty coffee grounds, an old magazine, some crumpled paper. A small thing maybe, but it snagged my attention. Ethan kept his yard meticulous, almost to a fault. My own coffee was still hot in my hand when I decided to walk over. The untouched newspaper lay on his front lawn, its plastic sleeves still glinting with dew. The front door was ajar, a sliver of darkness showing against the pale morning light. A cold prickle ran up my spine. This was too many things out of place for Ethan. I pushed the door open wider, the hinges groaning softly. "Ethan?" I called out, my voice sounding flat in the sudden quiet of the house. No answer. The air inside felt heavy, stagnant. I moved slowly through the living room, past the usual neat stacks of design magazines, into the long hallway leading to his studio. The silence pressed in. "Ethan? Sarah?" I called again, louder this time. Nothing. Then I saw him. He was on the studio floor, partially hidden by a drafting table, a small, dark pool blooming beneath his head. My breath caught. My stomach tightened into a knot. Ethan lay still, his face swollen and discolored, one eye nearly closed. His right arm was twisted at an odd, unnatural angle, bent like a broken twig. Bruises, purple and yellow, flowered across his bare arms and chest. There were cuts, too, jagged lines on his forehead and cheek. It was a chilling sight, more brutal than anything I had witnessed in person before. The quiet suddenly felt deafening, broken only by the frantic beat of my own heart. My hands started to shake, but I forced them steady, pulling out my phone. My fingers fumbled slightly as I dialed 911. "Yes, hello, my neighbor. Ethan Miles. I think he's been attacked. He's on the floor, unconscious. There's blood." My voice was tight, thin. While I spoke to the dispatcher, relaying the address and what I saw, my eyes darted around the room. Where was Sarah? "Is anyone else there?" the dispatcher asked. "I don't know," I said, my voice rising a little. "I need to check. Sarah usually stays here." I ended the call, adrenaline coursing through me now. "Sarah?" I shouted, my voice hoarse. I moved quickly, checking the bathroom, the small bedroom down the hall, the kitchen again. Everything was tidy, undisturbed, save for Ethan's studio. No sign of Sarah. Her car wasn't in the driveway, but she often walked to the coffee shop in town. Still, the situation with Ethan felt too grave to ignore her absence. Within minutes, the wail of sirens grew louder. Two police cruisers pulled up, then an ambulance, their emergency lights flashing a dizzying red and blue against the morning's gray. Paramedics rushed inside, their equipment bags clanking. Two officers, a man and a woman, approached me. "Sir, what did you see?" the male officer asked, his tone calm and professional. I recounted my discovery, the open garage, the spilled trash, the newspaper, the open door, and finally Ethan on the studio floor. I tried to keep my voice even, factual, pushing down the tremor that wanted to start in my hands. The paramedics were already working on Ethan, cutting away his shirt, checking his pulse, speaking in low, urgent tones. They secured his neck, stabilized his arm, and then carefully lifted him onto a stretcher. His face, even in its battered state, held a profound stillness. He remained unconscious. As they wheeled him out, one of the officers asked again, "You said there might be another person. A Sarah?" I nodded. "Yes, Sarah Collins. She lives here with Ethan. I haven't seen her. Her car isn't here either." The officer exchanged a glance with his partner, a subtle shift in their expressions. The stretcher was loaded into the ambulance, the doors closing with a quiet thud. The sirens flared again, then faded into the distance. The house, once full of frantic activity, settled back into a haunting quiet. The looming question hung heavy in the air, thick as the morning fog. Where is Sarah? The past, they say, is another country. For Ethan and Sarah, that country began in New York, in the dusty halls of a downtown college theater program. I knew some of this from conversations with Ethan, bits and pieces he'd let slip over coffee. They were both young, driven, and drawn to the stark, unforgiving world of the stage. Sarah, with her quick mind and sharper tongue, had arrived wanting to be an actress. She had a certain presence, sure, but it became clear early on that her real gift lay in seeing the whole picture. She could dissect a scene, understand the rhythm, the flow of a production. Directing was her calling, a quiet power she wielded with surprising clarity, not just performing. Ethan, on the other hand, was a recognized genius in technical theater. He wasn't flashy, didn't seek the spotlight. He preferred the hushed dark of the control booth, where he could manipulate realities with light and sound. He could turn a bare stage into a rain-swept street with a few clicks of a button, or conjure the tension of a looming storm with a rumble through the floorboards. His talent was precise, almost surgical. He built worlds while Sarah made them live. Their first real collaboration happened during a summer project in rural Connecticut, a short film being shot on a shoestring budget. It was an old converted barn of a theater, far from the city's glare. The days were long, the nights longer. Sarah, slender and curvy even then, with deep brown eyes that missed nothing, was assistant director. Ethan, handsome and fit, an avid runner who ate miles for breakfast, was the lead technical designer. They worked side by side, sometimes for 18 hours straight, the kind of demanding environment that either forged bonds or broke them. For 2 weeks, it was mostly shouted instructions across the cavernous theater. "More backlight on stage left, Ethan," Sarah would call from the floor, her voice cutting through the noise. "Coming, Sarah," he'd reply, his fingers already dancing across the lightboard. Late nights often found them alone, tidying up, adjusting the final settings, the only sounds the hum of equipment and the distant chirping of crickets. The air was thick with unspoken words, a shared understanding forming in the quiet moments between tasks. One night, the main set was finally lit exactly how Sarah wanted it. She climbed the narrow ladder to the control booth where Ethan sat, bathed in the soft glow of the monitor. "Perfect," she murmured, a genuine warmth in her voice. She leaned over, and before either of them could think, she pressed a soft, unexpected kiss to his cheek. "Thank you, Ethan. Really." It was a simple gesture, a natural outpouring of gratitude. Ethan turned, his hand reaching for his chin, and he kissed her back. Not on the cheek. His lips were soft, hesitant at first, then firm, a question and an answer all in one. The moment stretched, electric and fragile, until a distant voice broke the spell. "Ethan, Sarah, time to lock up." It was Director Peterson, his voice echoing from the main stage or already heading out the door. They pulled apart quickly, a blush rising on Sarah's cheeks. They descended the ladder in silence, a shared secret hanging between them. They cleaned up, moving with a practiced efficiency, trying to appear nonchalant, like nothing had just shifted in the universe. But the air between them had changed, a subtle current pulling them closer. Time became a precious commodity then. Filming began in earnest, and every moment was accounted for. But they found ways. Stolen glances across the set, an extra minute lingering after a meeting, a quiet walk to the production trailer. Their connection deepened in the small, unobserved spaces. One particular night, a late shoot ran even later. Director Peterson, who had been letting Sarah stay in his spare room, had to leave suddenly due to a family emergency. Sarah was left without a place. "You can stay at my place," Ethan offered, his voice calm, almost casual as they packed up. "I've got a guest room. It's nothing fancy, but it's clean." Sarah nodded, her eyes meeting his. The unspoken was loud in the silence. They arrived at Ethan's small, rented house well after midnight. Sarah had fallen asleep in the passenger seat during the drive, the long day finally catching up to her. Ethan gently woke her, and she mumbled a tired apology. He led her to the guest room, a simple space with a single bed and a small window looking out onto a dark garden. "The bathroom's just across the hall," he said, his voice low. "Help yourself to anything you need in the morning." He lingered a moment, their eyes meeting again, then turned and slipped into his own room. The house fell silent, a different kind of quiet now. It wasn't long, maybe an hour, when he felt a soft presence in his bed. Slender arms found their way around him. A hand brushed his hair. Then, the sweetest kiss, soft and searching. He turned to her, and the night unfolded in whispers and gentle touches. Later, as the first hint of dawn colored the sky, Sarah stirred against him. "It was good," she murmured, her voice thick with sleep and something else. A simple phrase, yet it carried the weight of a beginning. The first thing Ethan registered was the harsh glare of fluorescent lights. Too bright, too clinical. He tried to focus, but his vision flickered, a patchy landscape of white and shadow. His head throbbed, a drumbeat of pain behind his eyes. He realized he could only see from one eye. The other felt heavy, swaddled. Confusion, thick and disorienting, washed over him. He tried to push himself up, to sit, to orient himself. "Easy, easy, Ethan. Don't fight us. We're on your side," a soft voice murmured. A post-op nurse, her face kind but firm, pressed a hand gently against his shoulder. He felt the restraints then, soft but unyielding, around his wrists and ankles. Panic flared, a quick, hot spike, then dulled by the pervasive ache. "My eye," he mumbled, his voice a raspy whisper. "What happened to my eye?" He tried to lift a hand, but it was useless, weighted down, and when he managed to move his right arm, a sharp pain shot through it. He saw the white cast then, stark against the pale sheet. The severity of his injuries, suddenly undeniable, sent a chill through him, colder than the hospital air. It wasn't long before Dr. Hayes arrived, a man with tired eyes and a professional demeanor. He examined Ethan carefully, his touch gentle. "Mr. Miles, you've been through quite an ordeal," Dr. Hayes began, his voice low, almost grave. "You have a severe concussion, multiple fractures to your skull. We've repaired a detached retina in your left eye, but it'll be some time before we know the full extent of the recovery there." He paused, letting the words sink in. Ethan just stared, trying to process the grim catalog. "Your right arm is broken. That's why it's in a band. You also had a ruptured spleen and significant internal bleeding." Hayes paused again, then added, "You nearly died, Ethan, another hour, and we wouldn't have been able to save you." The words hung in the sterile air, heavy and blunt. He had a broken nose too, several fractured ribs. He learned he had been unconscious for 2 full days. 2 days gone, just like that. A strange emptiness settled over Ethan. He tried to grasp at memories, at anything that might explain this nightmare. But his mind was a blank slate, particularly regarding the events leading up to his hospitalization. "I don't remember the attack," Ethan stated, the words sounding hollow even to his own ears. Dr. Hayes nodded, his expression unreadable. "That's not uncommon with head trauma. Can you tell me what you do remember?" Ethan tried. He tried to piece together the last few days, the last few weeks, but it was all fog. "College," when he finally said, a faint memory sparking. "Freshman year. Theater, I guess." Dr. Hayes leaned in, a flicker of concern in his tired eyes. He asked more questions, simple ones at first, then more complex. What was his major? What year was it? Who was the president? Ethan's answers were disjointed, often wrong, always stopping at a point roughly corresponding to his first year of college. The doctor's face tightened. "It appears you have significant retrograde amnesia, Ethan. You're unable to recall anything since your freshman year." Just then, Detective Miller, a man with a square jaw and a worn leather jacket, entered the room. He had been assigned to the case. He listened as Dr. Hayes relayed the diagnosis, his expression visibly disturbed. Miller had been hoping for answers, but this wasn't what he expected. "Amnesia?" he repeated, a hint of frustration in his voice. He looked at Ethan, then back at the doctor. This complicated everything. "We found that your home security system was disabled, Mr. Miles," Detective Miller stated, his voice flat, professional. "It looks like it was turned off last Friday evening." Ethan stared blankly at him, the information meaningless. "Friday? What happened Friday?" His mind was a void. Miller sighed, running a hand over his face. The investigation was already difficult. There were no forced entry signs, no obvious struggle in the house beyond the studio. And then there was the other missing piece, the one that weighed heavily on everyone's mind. The mystery deepened, a cold, hard knot in the stomach of every person involved. Where had Sarah been all this time? The years after college were good to Ethan and Sarah, a period of quiet prosperity and deepening affection. By their senior year, their love had grown from the clandestine whispers of a summer project to a settled, comfortable understanding. Their careers were blossoming too. Ethan, with his meticulous eye and innovative approach, quickly became a sought-after set and lighting designer in the independent theater circuit. His work was precise, evocative, capable of transforming any space into a vivid world. Sarah, meanwhile, landed a stable, if demanding, team with a major opera company in New York. She worked her way up, proving her sharp directorial instincts weren't just for small college productions. Her schedule was grueling, but she thrived on the pressure, the grand scale of the productions. They rented a small, tastefully decorated apartment in a brownstone, a place filled with books, scripts, and the low hum of creative energy. It quickly became a popular hangout spot for their small circle of friends, a refuge from the city's relentless pace. Ethan, it turned out, was also a gourmet cook. He'd spend hours in their tiny kitchen, producing elaborate meals that delighted Sarah. "You always were good with your hands, Ethan," she'd once teased him over a perfectly roasted duck, her eyes twinkling. He just smiled, a quiet pride in his eyes. There was a comfortable intimacy between them, a warmth that radiated outward. Her eyes were rolling in bed, too, he'd later told me once, a rare, playful admission during a long evening of bourbon and shared stories. They seemed to possess a rare kind of happiness, a partnership built on shared passions and quiet devotion. Back in the present, Detective Miller sat across from me in my living room, the late afternoon light casting long shadows. His questions were methodical, probing. "Mr. Dale, how would you describe Ethan and Sarah's relationship?" he asked, his pen poised over a small notebook. I hesitated, thinking of the glimpses I'd had into their lives. "Perfect," I said finally, the word feeling a little inadequate for the depth of their connection. "They seemed deeply in love, always together, laughing. I never saw any trouble, no arguments, nothing out of the ordinary." Miller just nodded, jotting down my words, his face giving nothing away. His investigation was hitting roadblocks. The forensics team found no signs of forced entry at Ethan's house. No broken windows, no kicked-in doors. The house wasn't ransacked. Nothing appeared to be stolen. It wasn't a typical robbery. He'd spent days reviewing security footage from neighbors' homes, the grainy black and white tapes showing only mundane movements. A dog walker, a delivery truck, the occasional jogger. Nothing suspicious immediately around the time of the attack. The news of Ethan's severe memory loss only compounded the difficulty. Miller had gone to the hospital, tried to talk to him, but it was clear Ethan couldn't provide any useful information. How do you question a man who doesn't remember the last 15 years of his life? It was a dead end, so Miller shifted his focus, turning his attention to the missing person. Sarah. He started looking into Sarah's activities and contacts in the days leading up to the attack. Her family, contacted immediately after the incident, were worried sick, frantic for any news. They provided names of friends, colleagues, but no concrete leads to her whereabouts. No one had seen or heard from her since Thursday evening, the day before Ethan was attacked. Then Miller found something. Inconsistencies. Sarah's recent phone records showed a particular number called repeatedly in the week before Ethan was found, not a number belonging to her family or any of her known colleagues. A burner phone, Miller suspected, used just for these calls. The frequency and timing of the calls were unusual, often late at night. He traced the general location of the calls, noting they were all made from her home. A cold certainty began to settle over Detective Miller. Sarah's disappearance, initially attributed to the chaos of the attack, now felt less innocent, more deliberate. The image of Ethan and Sarah as the perfect couple, a picture I and others had painted so readily, was starting to crack under Miller's careful scrutiny. There was something else, something hidden, just beneath the surface. Detective Miller, with his quiet persistence, finally traced the repeatedly dialed number from Sarah's phone records. It led him to a local man named Mark Peterson, a set builder who worked for a different theater company. It wasn't uncommon for designers and builders to move between companies, collaborating on various projects. Miller learned that Mark had, in fact, worked with Sarah on several productions over the past 2 years. A professional connection at first glance, but the frequency of the late-night calls suggested something more personal. Miller paid a visit to Mark's apartment. It was located on the outskirts of town in an older building that smelled faintly of damp wood. The blinds were drawn, and a thin layer of dust already coated the mailbox. When he gained entry, the apartment felt eerily empty, scrubbed clean, almost as if it had been recently vacated in a hurry. A few sparse pieces of furniture remained, but personal effects were conspicuously absent. It raised Miller's hackles. This wasn't just someone out of town. This was someone who didn't want it to be found. After obtaining a search warrant, Miller's team conducted a more thorough search. Tucked away in a loose floorboard beneath a bookshelf, they found a small, hidden box. Inside were photographs, dozens of them. Photos of Sarah and Mark together, not in professional settings, but intimate moments. Laughing, holding hands on a beach, kissing in a dimly lit restaurant booth. Their bodies close, intertwined. The images depicted a passionate, undeniable relationship, far beyond mere professional collaboration. It suggested a long-standing affair, a hidden life Sarah had meticulously kept from Ethan. Further digging in the apartment revealed more. Love letters, handwritten and tucked between books, expressing intense feelings. Emails, printed out and stashed in a folder, confirming Sarah's deep involvement with Mark, full of secret plans and shared dreams. The evidence was damning, a stark contrast to the perfect image of Ethan and Sarah that everyone believed. Meanwhile, at the hospital, Ethan struggled with his fragmented memories. The head trauma had shattered his past into disjointed shards. He saw flashes, brief, almost ethereal images. Sarah's smile, the feeling of her hand in his, a quiet afternoon spent in their old New York apartment. But these familiar images were often accompanied by unsettling shadows, a sense of unease he couldn't quite articulate. Dr. Hayes, his patience unwavering, encouraged Ethan to try and connect with familiar objects or places, hoping to jog his recall. One afternoon, a nurse showed Ethan a picture of Sarah, a recent one taken from his bedside table. He looked at it, his brow furrowed. There was a flicker of fondness in his eyes, a recognition of her beauty, but it was quickly overshadowed by confusion, a profound blankness. Sarah, he murmured, the name sounding foreign, incomplete. Detective Miller, now armed with the cold, hard facts, cautiously approached me. We met again at the coffee shop, the scent of burnt sugar and stale grounds filling the air. Mr. Dale, he began, his voice lowered, I've uncovered some information regarding Sarah. It's difficult to share, but necessary. He laid out the evidence, the phone calls, Mark's abandoned apartment, the photographs, the letters. I listened, stunned, the coffee growing cold in my hands. The perfect couple, the deep love I had so readily attested to was a lie. Sarah, my friend's wife, was involved with another man. The betrayal felt personal, a gut punch. The detective began to build a timeline, connecting Sarah's recent behavior, the secret calls, the clandestine meetings, with Mark's sudden disappearance. The motive began to form, chilling and clear. A jealous lover, or perhaps a lover pushed to the brink. A desire to remove Ethan, to clear the path for their future together. It was a narrative as old as time, but no less brutal for its familiarity. Days later, during a routine therapy session aimed at memory retrieval, something shifted for Ethan. He was talking about a mundane day, a project he was working on, when a memory, sharp and unwelcome, broke through the fog. Sarah, he said suddenly, his voice tight. She was arguing on the phone, hushed tones in the kitchen, late at night. He paused, breathing heavily, trying to grasp the elusive detail. Another image, more vivid and disturbing, flashed in his mind. Sarah's face, not loving, not tender, but cold and distant, illuminated by the dim light of his studio on the night of the attack. A chilling thought surfaced, then vanished before he could fully grasp it. This unraveling of truth, layer by painful layer, makes you wonder how much we truly know about the people closest to us. Stick around to the end to see how life's costly choices unfold. 3 days after the discovery of the hidden photographs, Sarah reappeared in town. She materialized at the police station, looking disheveled, claiming she had been kidnapped, held against her will. Her story was a harrowing tale of abduction, forced transport to a remote cabin, and a daring escape. She gave a tearful statement to the police, her voice trembling, her eyes wide with what appeared to be trauma. She was convincing, at least to those who didn't know her. Detective Miller, however, remained highly suspicious. He found numerous holes in her fabricated story. The timeline of her supposed abduction didn't quite align with her disappearance. There were no witnesses, no physical evidence of a struggle where she claimed to have been taken. The details were too neat, too cinematic, and yet lacked the genuine terror he often saw in true victims. From the station, Sarah rushed to Ethan's hospital room, feigning immense relief and concern. She flung herself into his arms, sobbing, "Oh, Ethan, my love, what have they done to you?" She stroked his bandaged head, her touch gentle, her voice choked with emotion. Ethan, still fragile from his injuries and disoriented by his amnesia, was visibly comforted by her presence. Her familiar scent, her soft voice, were a balm in the sterile, confusing environment. But even through his haze, a faint unease lingered, a subtle discord in her performance that he couldn't quite place. Later, as Miller continued his investigation, Sarah tried to paint Mark as a dangerous stalker, obsessed with her, responsible for Ethan's brutal attack. "He was always watching me, detective," she claimed, her voice dropping to a conspiratorial whisper. "He tried to force himself on me. This whole thing, it's all him. He attacked Ethan, then took Malsamam." Miller let her speak, his expression unreadable. Then he confronted her, calmly laying out the evidence on the small hospital room table. The photographs of her and Mark, intimate and undeniable, the handwritten love letters, the printed emails. Sarah's carefully constructed composure flickered. She looked at the photos, her eyes widening, then narrowing. She initially denied it, a quick, sharp denial that lacked conviction. But under Miller's relentless quiet pressure, she finally admitted to a brief, regrettable fling, claiming Mark had coerced her, that she was under duress, fearing for her job, for her reputation. It was a flimsy excuse, and they both knew it. "Why was the security system off, Sarah?" Miller asked, his voice cutting through her strained excuses. "The night Ethan was attacked. It was disabled from inside the house." Sarah flinched. She started to stammer, her eyes darting nervously. I don't know. Maybe Ethan forgot? He's been so stressed with work." Her voice was higher now, betraying her agitation. Her composure was cracking, revealing the raw fear beneath. She turned to Ethan, her eyes pleading. "He's harassing me, Ethan," she said, her voice dropping to a wounded tone, implying Miller was preying on her vulnerability. "He thinks I'm involved in this. Can you believe it?" Ethan looked from Sarah to Miller, a blank expression on his face. He wanted to believe her, wanted to cling to the familiar comfort she offered. But a small, nagging voice, a faint echo from the deepest parts of his injured mind, whispered that something was wrong. He noticed inconsistencies in her story, small details that didn't align with the few faint memories that had begun to surface. The hushed phone call, the coldness in her eyes. I had been sitting in the waiting room, called by Miller to be present for Ethan's comfort, and had observed Sarah's behavior. The rushed arrival, the dramatic display, the quick shift from victim to accuser. She avoided my gaze, which only solidified my growing doubts. When Miller stepped out for a moment, I leaned in. "Detective," I whispered, "I think you're right. Something's not right with her." Miller nodded, a grim set to his jaw. The tension in the hospital room was palpable, a suffocating blanket. Sarah could feel it, the walls closing in, the web of her lies beginning to unravel. She was trapped, and her carefully constructed world was crumbling around her. With the evidence of the affair firmly established and Sarah's story riddled with inconsistencies, Detective Miller secured an arrest warrant for Mark Peterson. Now he was no longer just a missing person of interest. He was the primary suspect for Ethan's brutal assault. Miller put out an APB, and soon enough, a tip came in from a local park ranger. He tracked Mark to a remote cabin upstate, nestled deep in the woods, a place designed for hiding. Mark was found there, alone, looking gaunt and desperate. Mark was brought in for questioning. The sterile interrogation room, a stark contrast to the quiet wilderness he'd been found in. Initially, he denied everything, tried to maintain the fiction of being an unwitting party. But Miller was relentless, presenting him with the phone records, the photos, the letters, the evidence of Sarah's fabricated kidnapping story. Under the weight of it all, Mark finally crumbled. He confessed to the affair, his voice hoarse, his eyes downcast. She promised, he muttered. She said she'd leave him. We were going to start over, a new life. He revealed the plan hatched between him and Sarah. The original intention, he claimed, was for him to just scare Ethan away, to intimidate him into leaving Sarah. But things had escalated, the fear, the anger, the desperation. It had spun out of control. Then came the chilling truth. Mark explicitly implicated Sarah in orchestrating the attack. It was her idea, he said, his voice barely audible, to make it look like a robbery, to make him disappear for a while. He confirmed that Sarah was present during the assault, standing by, a silent witness. The brutality, the broken bones, the head injuries, all delivered while his lover watched. Miller brought Sarah in for a second, more aggressive round of questioning. She sat across from him, her face pale, her composure finally shattered. Miller played excerpts from Mark's confession, letting his words hang heavy in the air. Sarah listened, her eyes welling up, tears streaming down her face. But these were tears of fear, not remorse. Cornered, with no avenue left for denial, she finally broke down. She confessed to the affair. She admitted her role in the plan, confirming Mark's account. Her voice, usually so clear and controlled, was now ragged, choked with sobs. She told them how she had disabled the security system, how she had let Mark into the house, and then the darkest admission. She had been present during Mark's brutal assault on Ethan. Her motive was a desperate desire for a new life with Mark, seeing Ethan as nothing more than an obstacle in their path, a hurdle to be removed. He wouldn't just let me go, she sobbed. He was too good, too kind. He would never understand. Later in his hospital room, Ethan sat wrapped in bandages, his eyes fixed on the small speaker. Detective Miller had cautiously explained the situation, then offered to play the recording of Sarah's confession. Ethan had listened, his breath catching in his throat, as Sarah's voice, raw with guilt, detailed the planning, the motive, the presence, the full horror of that night flooded back. It wasn't just a flash now, it was a torrent of vivid, excruciating memories. The argument, Mark's sudden appearance, the sickening thud of the first blow. And then, Sarah. Standing by the studio door, illuminated by the dim light of his monitors, watching as Mark delivered blow after blow. Her face, devoid of emotion, her eyes cold and distant, utterly unlike the loving partner he had known. The image was seared into his mind, crueler than any physical wound. His world, the idealized past he had clung to, shattered into a million pieces, collapsing into a cruel, agonizing reality. She watched, Ethan whispered, the words barely audible, raw with pain and profound disbelief. The betrayal was deeper than the physical wounds, more devastating than the loss of memory. It was the complete annihilation of trust, the tearing apart of his soul. With their confessions and the corroborating evidence, Sarah and Mark were formally charged with aggravated assault and conspiracy. The news ripped through the quiet Midwestern community like a wildfire. The perfect couple facade, so meticulously maintained by Sarah, crumbled completely, revealing a dark, brutal truth. Whispers turned to outright condemnation in the grocery store aisles and coffee shop lines. No one could believe it. Legal proceedings began, a painful public spectacle for Ethan. Each hearing, each testimony, was a fresh wound, forcing him to relive the horror. He sat through it all, his face a canvas of physical recovery and deep emotional anguish. When it was his turn to testify, his memory was now fully restored. He recounted in a quiet, steady voice the brutal attack, the sudden rush of pain, and then, the worst part, Sarah's complicity. He described her standing by, watching, her cold eyes devoid of any recognition of the man she had once claimed to love. The courtroom was silent, save for his voice and Sarah's muffled sobs. The emotional toll on Ethan was immense. He was still grappling with the physical scars, the lingering pain in his arm, the occasional blurriness in his left eye, the constant ache in his ribs. But the profound betrayal, the shattering of trust, was a deeper, more insidious wound. It gnawed at him, a constant low thrum of disbelief and pain. I also provided witness testimony. I spoke about the open garage door, the spilled trash cans, the untouched newspaper. the open front door. I recounted my discovery of Ethan, battered and bleeding, and then I detailed Sarah's dramatic return, her tearful performance for the police, her calculated distress at the hospital, and the inconsistencies I had observed in her story. My words were precise, factual, adding another layer of concrete detail to the prosecution's case. Sarah's defense team, grasping at straws, attempted to portray her as a victim of Mark's manipulation, a woman coerced into a terrible situation. They painted Mark as the obsessive, controlling lover, the true villain. But the evidence was stacked too high against her. Her own confession, the detailed plan she'd helped orchestrate, her presence during the assault, and the extensive history of their affair. It was a weak defense, and it showed. Mark also testified, trying desperately to shift blame, to minimize his role, to emphasize Sarah's influence. But his earlier confession, recorded and played for the court, and the undeniable physical evidence of the beating he inflicted were damning. The jury listened, their faces grim. The court heard detailed accounts of Ethan's near-fatal injuries, the ruptured spleen, the internal bleeding, the multiple fractures, the detached retina. They heard about the long, arduous road to recovery he still faced. The prosecutor painted a vivid picture of a life almost extinguished by greed and calculated cruelty. In the end, the judge delivered a harsh sentence for both Sarah and Mark, reflecting the severity of the crime. Years in prison for aggravated assault and conspiracy, a fitting punishment, perhaps, in the eyes of the law. But for Ethan, it brought only a hollow sense of justice. He looked at Sarah's bowed head, at Mark's defiant glare, and knew that no amount of incarceration could truly mend what was broken inside him. The trust was gone, irrevocably shattered. He began intensive therapy, a slow, painful process of trying to process the trauma. He spoke about the attack, about the betrayal, about the loss of his idealized past. His once vibrant career was now on indefinite hold. The bright future he had envisioned with Sarah was replaced by a bleak, uncertain present, shadowed by the ordeal. The harsh realities of betrayal, infidelity, and violence settled deeply within him, a constant heavy weight. His life, once so full of light and sound, was now muted, a quiet, lingering echo of what it once was. Months bled into a year. The seasons turned, leaves falling, then snow, then the hesitant green of spring. Ethan's journey through physical and psychological therapy was long, arduous, a winding path through pain and fragmented understanding. The arm healed, leaving a faint scar. His vision in the left eye improved, though a slight blur remained, a constant reminder. But the deeper wounds, the invisible ones, were harder to mend. The trauma of the attack, the crushing weight of Sarah's betrayal, settled deep within him, altering the very landscape of his interior world. He couldn't stay in the house. Every room held an echo, every shadow a memory. The studio, in particular, was unbearable, a stage for the brutal unraveling of his life. He put it on the market, a quiet sale handled by a local agent. Watching the sold sign go up felt like tearing off a Band-Aid, painful but necessary. The memories weren't gone, but at least they were no longer tethered to every corner of his home. I remained a constant, quiet presence in his life. Lunches at the diner, evenings watching a baseball game on TV. Sometimes we talked, sometimes we sat in companionable silence. I offered what I could, a listening ear, a steady hand. He didn't ask for advice, and I didn't offer it, just friendship, unwavering and plain. Slowly, almost imperceptibly, Ethan began to re-engage with his work. He started with small freelance projects, intricate designs for local theater groups. He found a strange solace in the precise, logical world of technical theater, where light followed a cue and sound built a predictable atmosphere. It was a realm he could control, a stark contrast to the chaos that had engulfed his personal life. The creative process became a quiet anchor, a way to focus his mind away from the endless replay of betrayal. But intimacy and trust remained elusive. The betrayal had left deep, invisible scars, like fissures in bedrock. Casual conversations with new acquaintances felt fraught with hidden meanings. The idea of forming a new romantic connection was a distant, almost alien concept. He struggled to let people in, to believe in the sincerity of affection, always bracing himself for the inevitable deceit. It was a constant battle against the cynicism that threatened to consume him. He spent long hours in reflection, sitting by himself in quiet places, turning over the nature of love, the insidious creep of deceit, and the heavy moral consequences of choices. He saw how easily facades could be constructed, how quickly truth could be warped. He acknowledged the part of him that would always be changed, irrevocably marked by the ordeal. The naive optimism of his youth was gone, replaced by a guarded caution. He understood now that some prices, once paid, leave a permanent mark on the soul, a brand that no amount of time or therapy could fully erase. He'd often drive out to the edge of town, watching the sun set over the endless Midwestern fields. The landscape, with its deceptively calm horizons, mirrored the quiet unease that now lived within him. He realized that healing wasn't about forgetting, about trying to wipe the slate clean. It was about learning to live with the truth, however painful, about integrating the shattered pieces into a new, albeit different, whole. He found a new, smaller apartment, a functional space downtown. He decorated it simply, with clean lines and practical furniture, without the lavishness or artistic flourish Sarah had once loved. No grand statements, no illusions of perfection, just a place to be, to work, to exist. Life went on, as it always does. But it was a different life, one built on resilience forged in fire, and a newfound caution that informed every decision. Ethan, scarred but not broken, looked towards an uncertain future. He knew the path ahead would be solitary, demanding. He carried the weight of what had happened, the indelible mark on his soul, but he carried it with a quiet acceptance. He had survived the storm of betrayal, and in its aftermath, he was slowly, painfully rebuilding.